good, thank you. I'm going to start recording, so put your hands down. What buttons are you? What are you fiddling about with?
No, sorry, no, I was just fiddling about. I got a message came up saying something I couldn't understand, so don't worry. I'm behaving myself.
I'm going to introduce you, if I may, to everybody that's going to watch this later. My guest this afternoon is the enigmatic T.A. Williams, who, has many of you will have read his wonderful novels set in Italy. And his latest novel, An Escape to Remember, was published yesterday. And we'll talk about that, obviously, in the next sort of half an hour or so, hopefully, because already it's had some really, really good results, hasn't it? And you've had some wonderful comments on it. Mr. Williams, apparently, according to his bio, was born in England with a Scottish mother, a Welsh father, and he's taught English to Arab princes, Brazilian beauty queens, and Italian billionaires. So whether or not I can ask him to find me one, I don't know, but I'll work on that later. So yes, welcome. Lovely to meet you.
Thank you, Wendy. Nice to see you too. It's nice to actually associate a face to a name after coming across it so often. And you're the moving spirit behind the writers' retreat down in the
I am.
Sounds gorgeous.
Yes. Yeah, it's something that we've just kind of been planning for 12 months or so, but with COVID, it's just not been possible to put it into operation. But hopefully, a writing retreat, peace, swimming pool, wine, Italian landscape. What more could you want?
It sounds wonderful. Do I assume from your surname that you're married to an Italian, or was that yours from the start?
It wasn't mine from the start. I married into as you have, into a second generation. Well, I married into a second generation Italian. When we got divorced, I really wanted to keep the name. If I wanted to keep anything, it was definitely the name. So we came to a deal on that. And I love the name. I just love the name. I have to spell it for everybody all the time. How do you spell that? Well, it's like pasta. You just pronounce all the letters in it. It's fairly simple. But
that's the nice thing about Italian, that you do literally, unlike our language, you pronounce it like it is writ. Whereas in English, when I was teaching, if I had a class that really got on my nerves, I would write on the blackboard, through, though, although, rough, bow, and I forgot and cough.
Oh, yeah.
And say, right, now pronounce
That's a challenge
to pronounce. But it is, that's true. Italian, that's the nice thing. One of the nicer things about Italian, that it is fairly, once you've got the hang of
once you've
thing I always find difficult is the double letters.
Yes.
Like, well, I have none, so it doesn't matter, but hair is capello, but hat is cappello, because there's two P's in it. Yeah. So just one of those things.
You see, ladies and gentlemen, we've got an Italian lesson thrown in as well. So there you go. Anyway, let's talk about you. So would you like to just give us a resume of how you got into writing in the first place, please?
Right. Now I think about it, I'll just show you something.
Okay.
If I can find it. Oh, I should have thought. Basically, when I haven't got it. When I was 13, I think it was, I wrote a totally shameless rip-off of Arthur Ransom's Swallows and Amazons.
Yes.
All 44 pencil handwritten pages of it.
Right.
And that sort of was what started me off. I mean, needless to say, it just stayed in a folder and that was that. But I've written really all my life as relaxation, really. And of course, I was writing back in the days of not long before the internet. And so you wrote your book, you contacted, I suppose there must have been literary agents, but I never came across any. You contacted the publisher direct and you sent them the whole blooming manuscript.
Yeah.
And they wanted it just on one side of A4, double spaced, and it used to
Wow.
cost, even in those days, about a fiver a time to say,
Yeah,
and in
to
those
send
days
it.
a fiver was a fiver.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I actually have somewhere, I've got a file of rejection letters about the same, about sort of getting on for a telephone directory. Of course, we don't have those anymore, but you can remember telephone directories.
Yes.
And the one that always pained me most was from Collins back in the day, before they became HarperCollins. And I'd written a thriller, actually, and I sent it to them, and they read it, and they sent it to somebody else for a second reading, and they were getting ever so excited about it. And then I got a letter from them saying, due to the parlous economic situation in the country, so what's new, we are unable to take on a new author at the moment. And so that nothing happened. But had that happened, I was probably in my mid-20s, something like that. That's nudging 50 years ago. So things might have changed. But anyway, no, so I've been writing after the day job. In the evenings, I would come home, have something to eat, and then go and write. And I found it very, very rewarding, but unfortunately not financially. And then at the age of 63, 64, I finally found a publisher, which was, Carre. It was part of Harlequin in the day.
Okay.
And then you know the way it is with publishers, that it's all very incestuous. Harlequin got bought by HarperCollins. HarperCollins, then the name was changed then to HQ.
Right.
And I stayed with them for, he said, looking up at these pictures of his, hang on, let me just show you.
What have you got up there? Oh, how lovely. Oh, that's marvellous.
And that's not all.
Wonderful.
There's more over there as well. But
well, that's a veritable sanctuary of success, isn't it?
So about half of the books were, I think the first 8 or 9 were with what is now HQ, part of HarperCollins, and then I moved on from there to Canello, which I'm with at the moment. I love them to bits. I'm very, very happy with Canello. Not that I didn't like the others, but Canello, the wonderful thing is they let me write what I want to write.
Yes.
The editor I had before at HarperCollins, but she was just a bit prescriptive. So it's just the freedom of being able to, basically say to them, right, okay, they say to me, you've got a 3-book contract, and they just let me get on with it. I don't even need to give them
wonderful.
synopsis.
Wonderful.
I'm sure is the most difficult thing of all is to write a blooming synopsis of especially before you write the book.
Yeah.
So that's basically that's the way it goes.
Are they quite new, this publisher that you're with now? It's not.
Yeah, they've only been going for about 4 or 5 years. Very go ahead. It's 3 partners. All 3 come from the top 5, some fairly senior positions in the top 5, and they set up this company, and they're really good. They're very, it started off just being ebooks, and then it went from there to paperback as well, and from there to audiobooks as well. Right. And it's really a very, very pleasant bunch of people to work with.
So you're very happy with the people that you've got now. It's for people that don't know about writing books and publishing, it does seem to be, it's not uncommon, is it, that you start with one and then you go to another and then you swap and then you change. You're almost like record labels, isn't it, really? You know,
and of course there are people who are the so-called hybrid authors now, where they're partly with a publisher and partly self-published. Obviously, self-publishing, if you get it right, is the best way to make money, because you get all of it rather than paying half of it to your publisher. I must admit, I flirted with the idea, but to be honest, it's the writing that I enjoy. I'd rather just do the writing and let somebody else worry about whether it's $1.99 or 99p or whether it's going up on NetGalley or whatever.
I think that's hard. I think I think Amazon, it's just a double-edged sword, isn't it, really? Yes, they've opened it up to people that want to get their books out there, which is great. Love that idea. But, there's no quality control in this huge giant of this mechanism. You could publish anything.
I'm just amazed at how many books are published every year. And I think, however good the book, if it isn't getting the promotion, if it isn't visible, if it isn't being read, then nobody's going to know it's good.
No. Can we just go back and talk about your name? Because I think it's quite clever, this. It's like a J.K. Rowling, isn't it? You have the initials and the surname, and it creates this element of mystique around, is it a man? Is it a woman? Who is this person? I mean, what made you decide on that?
Well, it was my first editor at what is now HarperCollins, HQ, who was, well, in fact, back in the day when it was still Carre, it was called, a lovely girl called Cleo Cornish, who's now gone on to greater things. And in conversation, we were talking about this because it is sort of a little bit unusual for a man to be writing romance.
Yeah.
Although William Shakespeare did it, you know.
And,
so
you just copied him then? Well, I don't know.
And so that we just felt that it was maybe an idea to leave my gender slightly opaque, in the hope that people. And I'm amazed, actually, even just in this latest round of reviews that have come in for the new book.
Yes, I know. I saw it. I had to.
See the quote? Yeah.
I printed this off, and it was. Let me just read it out. Well, obviously, you know what it is. I was surprised to discover the author was a man, as it's quite rare for this genre, but he writes romance beautifully, and it's romance exactly as I like it.
Yes, and she actually goes on to say the reason she doesn't like the bedroom shenanigans.
Shenanigans.
Well, the thing, apart from the fact that I'm probably too old for bedroom shenanigans anyway, my daughter reads all my stuff.
Yes.
And she insisted from the very start that there was no way she
shenanigans.
No smut from you, Dad. So she doesn't get the smut.
How old is your daughter now?
Well, my daughter's 43. And she has just graced us with the arrival of a brand new baby girl. So we're celebrating.
Many
baby
congratulations.
Iris is 2 months old today. So
that's wonderful.
They're up in London, and we go up and see them every night. It's beautiful, lovely. She, for her, it was a forlorn hope, really. And then suddenly along came Iris. So
that's wonderful news. That's lovely. So I know you've let me into a secret on Facebook that your first name is Trevor. So what's the A for?
A is for Anthony, and I wish they'd just started with Anthony and left off the Trevor. I hate the Trevor, always have done. Okay. I mean, it could have been worse. My father's, he was David Williams, very Welsh, Swansea Valley Welsh.
Yes.
But his second Christian name was Elias.
Oh.
So I suppose I could have been Melchior or Beelzebub or something. Trevor probably wasn't that bad. But yes, Trevor Anthony. I'd much rather have been a Tony than a Trevor, but you get used to it after 72 years. And
I know you've had such a busy day yesterday with your publication day, and the results were starting to come in, which you must be really, really pleased about. And I've got them here. Number 1 in food, lodging and transportation for travel. Number 1 in Italian travel. Now, I just wondered if that's something fairly new that Amazon was starting to use Italian travel, because I hadn't really noticed that. So, it seems to be quite a new heading, doesn't it?
Yes, I mean, they have Italian travel. Then the other category where I appear quite often is holiday romance or holiday fiction. But yes, Italian, as far as I'm concerned, all right, as we've already said, I married an Italian, but I did French and German actually at university, and came out of university looking for a inverted commas serious job, and looking back, management trainee or something or other. And looking back on it now, I'm delighted I wasn't offered anything. And so I thought, well, I was at Nottingham. I got a job in Boots warehouse, Boots the chemist, working over the summer. And I thought, well, I'll go off and I'll make myself more marketable. I'll go and learn another language. So I applied for various jobs that I saw advertised in the Times educational supplement back in the day. And there was one, I had 2 interviews in 1 week, both of them for teaching jobs. I thought that's the easiest. That was in the days when all you needed was a degree, in fact, barely that. and you could go and teach English straight away, more or less.
Mm.
And one was in the Alps, just north of Turin in Italy, and the other would have been in Lisbon in Portugal.
Right.
And I went for the interviews, and I was offered both jobs, which was rather nice. And at the equivalent in the day, well, I don't know what the equivalent would be now, but basically it was for roughly £84 a month. So we're going back a while.
Yes.
And in the end, I took the Italian job purely for one reason, and that's because there was a company car.
A company car for a teacher. Yeah. Wow,
so they provided me
incredible.
With a car. I mean, well, yeah, don't get too carried away. I went over and found it was a very, even in those days,
a Fiat 500.
Cinquecento, but the old, not the sexy nude Cinquecento.
It was a classic.
I mean, they're wonderful things. They had 3 gears, 3 forward gears, and reverse was where you would normally have your first gear. Right. So you stop at the traffic lights and you push it forwards into first gear and you accelerate backwards into the guy behind you. So it wasn't it? Oh, and the starter motor was knackered.
You should have kept it. It would be worth a fortune now.
I know. Had it not been for that, I mean, I would probably have gone to the Lisbon job. I'd probably have gone to Brazil, and who knows? I might well be. I'd have died of dengue fever or something in the process. So no decision made. It just
I know you said about how you've always been interested in writing, but did you feel that teaching English helped a bit more? And because you're trying to explain your own language to somebody else and you're marking essays and things, did you feel that helped at all, being a teacher?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say that although I think I was quite an effective teacher, and I was certainly, I think, quite a popular teacher, mainly because I wasn't too sort of disciplinarian. It was adult education.
Yeah.
And of course, I fell foul of the what happens to people in adult education. I married one of my students. So,
well, I won't tell anybody.
As far as the writing's concerned, I don't know. Yes, I suppose because there was a link with the language, that did maybe spur me on, particularly with some of the more advanced classes where we were actually handling literature a bit. But after only 4 years, I actually stopped teaching and went into school management. Right. And I then spent the rest of my time, well, I was only in Italy for 8 years, but then came back to the UK and ran one of the biggest English language schools in the UK for 25, 30 years.
You've had quite an illustrious career, haven't you, really? I mean, when you get to a certain time of life, to say that you've done things that you've really enjoyed is just wonderful, isn't it?
I think the main thing for me is that apart from just those first years when I was starting out, when I loved my boss. He was a total wonderful drunk, humorous guy. He died a few years ago, but we were still very, stayed in contact. But apart from him, I never really worked for anybody. I never had a boss, really. So having your own, being your own boss makes such a difference to your quality of life, because ultimately, yes, you have your problems with the business, but I think your boss is potentially more of a problem than the business problems when they come along. But no, I've been very lucky, and certainly when I was running the school back here in Exeter, a lot of my time was spent going on overseas marketing trips, and I've been quite literally all over the world trying to flog my wares in places like Japan and China and off to the Middle East. And I remember going to Libya on one occasion and getting lost in the desert, and a little chap in a boiler suit sticking a machine gun through the window of the car.
Oh gosh.
So yeah, all sorts.
Anyway, let's move on to the books. Let's just talk about the books. The regions that what is your favourite region of Italy?
Well, really no contest. It's Tuscany. It has to be Tuscany.
Yeah.
My wife's actually from Piemonte, which is up in
Yeah.
Yeah. And I spent a couple of years, when I first went over, I spent a couple of years in Piemonte, which was just, as I say, just north of Turin. And then another couple of years up the valley from there towards the Mont Blanc, the Monte Bianco, a place called Alta, and taught up there for a couple of years. But then we did 4 years, we got married and we moved down to Florence, where I got it was a privilege to do it, opened a new language school in Florence. And we were literally the first building behind the Duomo.
Oh, wow.
So I would go to work. We were living. We rented, because we didn't have a lot of money. We rented an apartment in an 11th century convent, and to be honest, it probably hadn't had much done to it since the 11th century. The heating, the only source of heating, and Florence can get blooming cold in the
I can imagine.
The only source of heating, there was a wood burner stove made of terracotta, and the pipes that came up from it and went around the room were all sort of sculpted, molded terracotta. Beautiful thing. Didn't heat the room at all, but anyway, it looked lovely. And we lived there for 4 years, and I just developed a complete love of the place. It's the food, the people, they're wonderful.
Amazing. We were there not that long ago, actually, couple of months ago, and there's a beautiful area where they have markets overlooking the whole of Florence. I don't know the name of
Piazzale Michelangelo, probably, up at the top.
I think I must have just stood there for so long with my camera, just trying to get this panoramic view of all of it. It's just one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. It really is.
It's a stunning place. And as I say, for me, the privilege of being able to go to work literally 20 yards from arguably one of the most famous buildings in the world was quite stunning. And
I could hear some American women saying behind me going, and you can see the synagogue really clearly. And I was saying, where? Which one's the synagogue? And they seem to had more of an idea what you could see than I could. But it really is quite spectacular.
Yeah, no, I love that, but I do love, as I say, I spent some very happy years, and meeting my wife. My wife's family still live in the north. I do like Piemonte, and in fact, the latest book, if I can just flash it at the camera, is
wonderful.
It's set in it's the wine making hills of northern Italy, where they make Barolo is probably the most famous one. But Barbera and things like that. Asti, just up the road from Asti. I don't know if you remember Asti Spumanti.
I do.
We used to
Prosecco these days, but
Asti Spumanti spelled SPEW. We used to have at university, and it was foul stuff. But there are some very good wines and some very good sparkling wines there. But you can't beat a good Prosecco.
So talk me through the process. What comes first? The ideas? What is your thought process? Do you just your research? Talk me through how you do it.
I wish I knew. I do my sort of average day is spent sitting at the computer sort of in the morning, and then in the afternoon I either go for a long walk or a long bike ride. Not so much now because it's getting just silly. I got knocked off my bike. But anyway, you go take some exercise and walk around I live in Devon, by the way, just in a little village just outside Exeter, and you can literally just walk outside the door and you're into the lanes and wandering around there. And sometimes an idea will come. I normally, when I'm starting off, I know where it's going to be set as the first thing. So I know if it's going to be in Florence or Venice or wherever it might be, or indeed back here. But interestingly, funnily enough, I was just talking the other day that I've written 23, I forget, 22, 23, 24 books, whatever it is. And I think that 6 of them are not set in Italy. And all of the others have sold better than the Italian ones have sold better than the ones that I wrote. Now, this may just be a reflection on the way I write when I'm writing about Italy, because I do love the place.
Yes.
And maybe when I write about books set in Devon or Cornwall or something, I'm not quite so convincing, much as I like living here. And so, the process, I know where it's going to be, where it's going to be set. I know who the main protagonist is going to be. As you may have gathered from my books, I got into the habit of making my main protagonist female, and the book is written very much through her eyes. So I've tried, and it's a very, very risky thing to do, I've tried to think myself into the head of a woman, not least into the head of a sort of 30-year-old woman. And have we got time for me to tell you the joke about the Queen?
Go on. Sure. Go.
Prince Charles is going to visit the Queen, and he's in his Range Rover, and he drives into Buckingham Palace, and one of the corgis comes running out, goes, ba-dum-ba-dum, runs over the corgi, kills it outright, splattered onto the cobbles. And he thinks, oh, I'm in trouble now. And he puts his hands together, he raises his eyes to the sky, and he says, God, are you listening? It's Charles here. I have a terrible problem. Can you help me? And a light shines down, and the cavernous voice says, Charles, what can I do to help? And he says, God, I've just killed one of Mummy's dogs. Is there any way you could bring it back to life? And there's a pause, and then God says, look, Charles, be reasonable. I'm a reasonable man. I'm God. I can do everything, but this dog is now spread over about 6 foot of cobbles. It's going to take an awful lot of putting back together again. I'd like to help you. Can't I help you with something else? And Charles says, well, there is just one thing. This morning at breakfast, Camilla was acting very strangely. I said, are you all right? And she said, fine. I wonder, God, could you maybe help me then? If you can't help me with the dog, could you help me? Well, what do women mean when they say things like that?
Yes.
And there's another pause, and God says, we'll take another look at that corgi, shall we? So I took the risk of trying to think myself into the head of a woman, and touch wood.
Well,
it
you're
seems to
very successful at it. I mean, it's sort of, you know, very reminiscent of what was the film, you know, What Women Want. You know, if you speak, women are from, was it Venus, and men are from Mars, but if you speak Venusian, the world is yours.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't had any death threats, so I work on the basis that that's you know, pretty much. I think people do, the general feeling when people comment on it, they do tend to say that it seems to ring reasonably true. Well, what I find, what I've tried to do, and I would always try to do, is I make my girls like me, really, in the sense that I'm not writing about shrinking violets. I'm not writing about silly little girls who are more interested in just sort of, you know, what high heels they're wearing or whatever. These are people with a brain. Yeah. They're people who've got a something that they want to do, serious thing they want to do in life. And romance is great. Romance is part of it, but romance isn't everything for them. No. And so in quite a few of my books, you do get this conflict, which, of course, back in my day was even more visible, between marriage and life, if you like, yes. Marriage and career, yeah, for women. Now women are much more emancipated. It's easier to get on with that, but for biological reasons, there is always going to be this bit of a problem. But so it's because of how you feel, you're saying about how women have changed, obviously, evolution. Do you think your writing has changed over the years? If you look back and you look at the women that you've written about in the early days and the women that you write about now, do you see that change? You actually... Yeah. No question. No question. Certainly, it's only since starting this, well, my published books, so 7-8 years ago, whatever it was, that I've actually started writing through the eyes of a woman. Before, all my books were written from a male point of view. Yeah. And I've never been a dirty book writer or whatever, but I suppose that the way that I think, I mean, it's also life. You know, you go through life. I've now been married for 44 years, and you learn an awful lot about the person you're with, and they learn an awful lot, probably some of it not terribly nice about the person they're with, but you do learn as you go along. And yes, of course, my attitude to so many things, but particularly to the opposite sex, is has been evolving.
And what would you say about the time that you spend on research? How does that figure into
I have a very firm belief that well, somebody once said, I'm sure lots of people have said it, write about what you know. Yeah. And so I have never written, apart from the odd page or two, about a place I've not visited. And I've never written about anything that I haven't researched fully. Just as an example, say, I did a series of books for Canella. The first series were Dreaming of. In fact, my very best-selling book was Dreaming of Tuscany. But one of those books, for example, is Dreaming of Rome. And my heroine there, I just decided, I'm not quite sure why, that probably on one of my walks, I came across a number of them. It made me think about it. I thought I would give her an interest in Lepidoptera, so interested in butterflies. And so I started reading up about butterflies. They are fascinating things. Did you know that a butterfly can taste through its feet?
Okay.
So when it lands on a flower, it can tell through its feet whether it's going to like the pollen in the flower. Amazing things.
Oh,
so anyway, and all the way through, I've been doing, for example, one that I've just finished writing now. In fact, it's due to go off to my editor today or on Monday. My main character was actually a captain in the army. And I didn't know this, but in the Royal Engineers, women have been on the front line in bomb disposal.
Okay.
And so I made my girl do what argued has got to be one of the most terrifying jobs in the world. And so I had to read up all about that. And there's another one's about Médecins Sans Frontières, a doctor, and so on. So yes, I do try and research everything as fully as possible.
Do you get to a point where you think, right, I've got to stop researching now, stop procrastinating, and let's just write the thing? Is it very tempting to just keep researching?
Research for me actually tends to be an as you go along thing.
Okay.
So, I would start the book, set it up, and then we get to chapter 2, chapter 3, or whatever, and her interest in butterflies or whatever it is, what happens in the operating theatre comes in. And at that point, then I would have to take a day or two going onto Google and reading it all up. And or I actually have a very good friend who's a doctor, for example. I was able to ask him all sorts of things. And a guy who was in the military, he was able to tell me all about improvised explosive devices, IEDs, all this kind of thing. So yes, on the internet and through friends, try and get as much info as possible.
But no, it just adds to the authenticity of it, doesn't it, really?
It does, yeah. I mean, I'm very much, I think the technical term is a pantser. I'm a seat of the pants writer.
Yes.
I don't start off with the only plan really is, I know what her name is, and by the way, it will be a short name because I'm a crap typist.
I saw that.
And so as long as, if I was to call somebody Henrietta or something, it would take twice as long to write a book. So call her Jane or Liz, and I'm far better off. So I know what the name of the girl is. I also know the name of the dog, which is very important because there has to be a Labrador in it.
Okay.
So I know where it's going to be set, and I know that it's going to have a happy ending. It's a given for this type of book. And then off we go, really. I've been increasingly getting interested in the initial, page for that matter, but the initial chapter as a lead-in, whether it be as a prologue or as a chapter 1. I think that's very important. For example, my one before, whichever one was it, the Secrets on the Italian Island. I have a terrible memory, by the way, so that's why I'm looking at the pictures of the covers of the books. Secrets on the Italian Island is set on the island of Elba. And the main character is a geologist. And she starts off, the actual first paragraph of the book is her hanging 50 meters from the top of a disused mine shaft and about 100 meters from the bottom of a disused mine shaft. And again, of course, I had to research all that.
Did you visit Elba for any of that research then? Did you?
Well, we visited Elba 30 years ago when Christina, my daughter, was still very young. And I loved it at the time. And we were scheduled to go back 2 years ago in May. And of course, because of the lockdown and so on, that didn't happen. But I was lucky that I'd been there and I could remember enough of it. And then there's this wonderful resource, Google Earth, which is wonderful. I mean, it's not the be all and end all, because Google Earth will never be able to give you the sounds or the smells or the tastes of a place. But it will at least give you a very good idea of just simple things like if you're standing on the harbour side in a certain port on the island of Elba and you look to your left, will you be able to see around the corner, or will it just be a cliff, that sort of thing?
I think that there are definitely some islands like Elba. We've visited that one. We've spent quite a lot of time researching into the beer of Elba, because they brew their own. It's really good.
I didn't know that.
Really good. Yeah, they brew their own beer there. But there are so many islands, aren't there? Everybody just goes to Sicily and everybody goes to visit Capri, and that's great, and they're lovely. But there are so many beautiful islands in Italy.
I know, yes.
People
in fact,
don't know so much about.
up near Tuscany, of course, there's Isola del Giglio,
Yes.
where people know of that because there was that huge cruise liner went aground on Giglio, just near Giglio.
Yeah.
But no, there's some beautiful places. When we were living in Tuscany, we actually went for a weekend to the island of, I forget now, there's a penal colony on there, apart from anything, not Chedby, something like that anyway. And there was literally only about 50 people lived there, plus this penal colony.
But they're quite amazing, aren't they?
Wild birds and so on, just
beautiful.
And whereas on dry land, it's all the typical Italian beaches, meticulously raked. You pay for the privilege of having your umbrella and your chaise longue to lie on, and the changing rooms and so on. Whereas over there on the island, it was completely wild and
wonderful,
beautiful, really.
Wonderful. And talk about reviews. How do you deal with reviews? I mean, everybody does them now, don't they? And I know many authors get not so good reviews by people that haven't even read the book. And it must be so frustrating as an author when you invest so much time and money. The least that you want from a reviewer is, well, surely you've read the book, haven't you?
I know. Funnily enough, just this morning I was looking on Goodreads.
Yes.
And I now have, I think, 16,500 reviews, or ratings rather, so not all of them are reviews. Yeah. And so, I mean, I've seen it all. One of my best 5-star reviews said, excellent shoes, perfect fit, will buy again.
Right.
And somehow it ended up on mine. It gave me a 5-star review, so I'm not going to say no to that. My best 1-star meview was, all it said was, meh.
Oh, really? ...
meh. But you cannot be all things to all people. You can't keep everybody happy. So you've just got to, I think,
take the rough
advice to any new writer.
Once you put yourself out there to write, we live in that kind of society now where everybody can fire off these reviews on Trustpilot and Amazon, and you just have to. Well, I know you've said to me before, you just have to just toughen up to it, really. Just
roll with the punches. I mean, there is a certain kind of person who is going to look at a book which has got 100 5-star reviews and stick in a 1-star review just for the hell of it.
Yeah.
But you just live with it. I think the main thing is, don't expect every review to be glowing. It can't be. It's just physically impossible for you to do something which appeals to everybody. As long as the majority of them are good or very good, you can be reasonable.
I wanted to thank you actually for completing all those notes so wonderfully. I wasn't giving you any homework, honestly. It was just because it's lovely to have a chat, but it's quite nice to have sometimes a structured chat so that people have an idea of what's she going to ask me, what's she going to ask me. But for anybody at home, this is what Mr. Williams sent me, returned with beautiful.
Please call me Trevor. Don't call me Mr. Williams. Makes me feel so old.
That Trevor sent me, so I had some fun reading that. Because one of my questions I do like to know is whether or not writing energizes you or exhausts you. So, what's your answer to that?
Well, I'm not sure what I put down on that bit of paper. The answer is, it's a reason to get up in the morning.
Yeah.
It's energizing.
Full
of
marks,
course it is.
Yeah. No, that was good. That was good.
And the other thing, I think if it were exhausting, particularly at my age, I wouldn't do it. There are moments, I don't know if you have the same, but I have probably got half a dozen books that I've got to about 30, maybe even 40,000 words writing them, and I've realized that they're a load of rubbish, and I've just stopped. And some of them I then managed to sort of cannibalize into a new book. But there's probably an awful lot, probably hundreds of thousands of words that I've written which will never see the light of day, because I get to a stage when I'm writing it when it becomes a slog. And at that point, if it's a slog for me, then it's going to be a slog for the reader. So far better to just up stumps and start again.
I mean, you're almost like self-assessing your work, really, aren't you?
Oh, you have to.
Yeah. And the other thing I was going to ask you is, Would you say that any, when you meet people in a restaurant, new people, do you think, I could use her in a book? And, do you base any on real life people or all fictitious?
I mean, certainly, there are people I have met over the years that there will be parts of them which appear in the book. But apart from not wanting to get sued by anybody, I think it's, I tell you what I'm not very good at. I'm not very good at writing nasty people.
Okay.
I think I'm much happier, and I think I'm a better writer when I'm writing about nice people. And because there are an awful lot of nasty people in this world, and you tend to bump into them, whether it's somebody slapping somebody on a plane or somebody sitting in Moscow dropping bombs on a helpless country or whatever it might be, I don't really want to reproduce that kind of person. So I tend to probably pick and choose and take the best bits from people rather than necessarily taking the worst. Yes, there are various bits, behavior that I've noted in people that I maybe reproduce in the books, but generally I think they're an amalgam. There you go.
And do you think, well, obviously this kind of escapism it certainly appeals to readers, it appeals to people in general. It's like watching a good film, isn't it? You just want to be transported somewhere nice.
It appeals to me as well. I mean, it works both ways. It's not just for the reader, because I do a lot of my writing in the winter when it's cold and it's wet and it's dark. And being able to sit down and write a page about people lying in the sun on a beautiful Italian beach or in Saint-Tropez or whatever it might be, that's good for me too.
Is your wife a critic of the books?
She's great.
Yeah,
she's great. She's Italian. We still speak Italian at home, believe it or not.
Oh, do you?
Because it was our natural language when we first met. And I mean, her English is super. She did an MPhil and so on in England, but she's still very happy speaking to me in Italian. I speak to her, and of course our daughter then grew up bilingual, which was quite good.
Wonderful.
But because of that, when she reads my stuff, she probably takes twice as long to read as I do. But what it means is that she reads every single word, and when she comes to something where I've written TOO instead of TWO, she notices.
Right.
And in terms of what's going on in the book, partly, yes, she can read what I've written and say, no, I wouldn't do that if I were you. But the other thing is, even before I write it, being able to sit down, I always try and give her the first 20,000 words of a book. She then reads that, so therefore she's got an idea of the characters mapped out, and she can see the direction of travel of the book. And then it means that she and I can talk about these invented names, these invented characters, with some kind of plan for the future. And she comes up with some lovely ideas that
wonderful.
I've put into practice.
That's quite a nice collaboration in a way, isn't it, really?
Absolutely.
Lovely.
Absolutely. She's an artist, and she spends her life up in her studio. And I spend my life down in my study, and we meet up for meals and at bedtime, and it works perfectly.
You must eat a lot of pasta. You've got an Italian wife.
Yeah, I have been accused of having married her because of the cooking. That's not true. But yeah, we do eat quite a bit of pasta, but also eat an awful lot of salads and things. She's got a thing at the moment about red meat. Doesn't think red meat. It's like the old joke. My dog doesn't eat meat. Why not? Because I don't give it any. Well, I don't eat much red meat. No, why not? Because my wife doesn't cook me much.
No. Wonderful. And what I was also interested to know, and you have mentioned this one already, your childhood book. What book would you associate with your childhood, and what possibly inspired you?
Yeah, but it certainly didn't inspire me as far as this latest series of books is concerned. But when I was young, it was definitely Enid Blyton, Famous Five.
Yes.
And then it was Arthur Ransom, Swallows and Amazons. All those books.
Yeah.
Even to the extent that I got my parents to take, because we used to, as we've already established, my dad was from Wales, my mum was from up in the very north of Scotland. And on one occasion when we were driving up to Scotland, I got them to stop off at Windermere, and I rented a boat and rode this dinghy all over the place. So much so that I wore
recreating your own adventure. Famous Five meets
exactly. So that was reading, and then as I suppose got to teenage and later, I got hooked on people like, well, I mean, the master of everything is, excuse me, I've just got to have a drink. John le Carre. Okay. John le Carre, I think, is just wonderful. There's also a guy called Len Dayton, those spy novels I really like. Yeah. Alistair MacLean, who wrote Where He Was There.
Quite a genre there, yeah.
Well, you see, when I first started out writing, apart from my 40-page epic as a kid, the first books I wrote were thrillers. As I say, they'd never seen the light of day, but that's what I was reading and that's what I was writing. And it was only, well, I mean, if you've got a moment, I'll tell you why I started writing romance. It was literally, I'd been writing, I went through a stage where I got really hooked on the Middle Ages. And I was writing books set in the Middle Ages. And again, nobody wanted to publish them. And I had got yet another rejection letter through it was the beginning, it was the 5th, it was Saturday, the 5th of January, 2013, I think it was. And my wife went to the shops and she came back with the local newspaper, the Western Morning News. And there was an article there written by a lady who's gone on to become quite a good writer herself, whose name, of course, because of my age, I can't remember. But she in those days was the editor of, I think, the Bookseller magazine. And she was being asked, what's going to be big in 2013? And I can remember I read this article and it said, in the wake of the success of 50 Shades, erotica will do well, but not just ordinary erotica, but also historical erotica. Now, I've been writing these historical novels and I thought, all right, they want a bit of smut. I'll have a go at a bit of smut.
Yes, that's smut.
And so I literally, that weekend, I settled down for 2 days and tried to write the start of a dirty book set in the Middle Ages, and very quickly realised it wasn't for me. I didn't have the experience, and I didn't have the desire to write.
The research on that might have proved interesting.
Well, I tell you what, really. There was a moment there where if anybody had been checking my browsing history, seriously worried. So what I did is I turned the book on its head, and I made it about a guy like me trying to write a dirty book, not realising how to do it, and so he gets a little group of female writers to help him, and they get together, and then obviously people fall in love, and the book never gets written. But anyway, that's just the way it was. And it was that was the book that I sent to Karina, to Harlequin. I noticed that they got one of these open submission things.
Yes,
and that was and I wrote it in 4 weeks, 80,000 words in 4 weeks.
Gosh.
Just whoosh, just came straight out.
How do you do it now? You do it on your laptop now, do you? You're writing.
No, I do it. No, I don't have a laptop actually. I've got an iPad, which is what I'm speaking on now. But I always do it on a desktop computer.
Okay.
At my desk, without any music, just basically sitting at my desk. It's just the way to do it. Anyway, I sent that off to Karina, and then in April, beginning of April. First thing in the morning, I got an email through from what would become my new editor there, Cleo Cornish, saying she was offering me a 2-book contract. And I took the iPad and I dashed through to the shower where Mariangela, my wife, was having a shower, and frightened the life out of her, banged on the glass, held this up to the glass and said, look. And we will both always remember that moment.
How wonderful.
So it was sheer chance, really. It was just a reaction. Well, if they don't want my serious stuff, bugger it, I'll go for something a bit more saucy. Couldn't do the saucy, so I tried to go for funny.
So now that you are at the point you are, and what would you say success means to you? The fame, the money, what does it mean?
Right. Well, money's useful. Fame, I don't think I have any great fame, and certainly not being on any TV programs or anything. But if I can just sound terribly serious a moment, immortality, Wendy.
Okay.
Because basically, as I say, I'm 72. I'm not going to be around for that much longer, hopefully for a while. But basically, when I die, my books will still be here.
Yes.
And it's rather a nice thought to think that, there will be people who will maybe read one of my books in 30 years' time, and by which time, you know, I'll be long gone, and maybe like my stuff and maybe think, oh,
that is nice.
he sounds like an interesting guy. That's I think would be that's
that's
if
lovely.
I've achieved that, it's great.
Then it's all been worth it.
Absolutely.
What advice would you have for people that really want to get to where you've got to, for people starting out writing, a do and a don't?
Right. Well, of course, things have changed, as we've already said, have changed drastically since when I first started out, when there was no Amazon, there was no internet. And the only way to get published in those days was effectively a mainstream publisher. And the chances of getting picked up by one of them was, well, probably the same as they are now, virtually non-existent. And it was, you know, a forlorn hope. Now, self-publishing, and that's right, back in my day there was the thing called Vanity Publishing,
yes,
which is when you paid a vast amount of money to some company who produced
it's still around, and
you know, if you were lucky, you sold a few. A friend of mine self-published, I mean, it's a very, very erudite book. He self-published a book which is 900 pages long. It's a sort of comparative religions thing, and because he's my friend, I bought it. 1999, the damn thing's the size of a
an encyclopedia.
And I read my way through it. It took me two months to read it, and I finally got to the end and discovered that the very last chapter was a summary of all the other chapters.
Oh no! Oh no!
If only you told me. So like I say, people starting out, what just keep going, persevere. We've already said, make sure that you have a thick skin. That's obvious.
Yes.
And don't discount the idea of self-publishing.
No.
Have a go at getting. I think nowadays there are literary agents you can go to, but they're frankly, the good ones are almost as difficult to get picked up by as a big one of the top big 5 publishing houses. But there are a number of these so-called digital first publishers like Canello, where I am, although I notice they are now not accepting any more submissions.
No.
But there are companies who are still taking pitches from people, submissions from people. So try all those and don't
just keep going. Perseverance.
Exactly. Persevere. Don't let the bastards grind you down. You know, it will be hard, but you know, you've just got to keep going. Believe in what you're doing, and if you believe in it, let's face it, if you don't believe in what you're doing, then it ain't gonna go anywhere anyway.
So people can buy your books from Amazon. We've already said you do have your own website as well. Do you try and keep that? You put the latest books on there. You keep that sort of relatively up to date with.
It's a bit of a sore point, actually. I'm really terrible as far as the interweb's concerned, and I tried to get on to my website yesterday. It occurred to me as I got a new book out, I better put it on there, and it won't let me in. I've obviously forgotten the password, or it's forgotten me or something. So yes, it's something that I should be much better at, which is another reason why I'm really happy that I've got a publisher who's doing all that stuff.
Who does the marketing. But even so, it's so nice that you can be in touch with your readers, your fans, your fan base. It's, I think, something that the internet has given us now, and social media is like, for me, I can talk to you, I can speak to you about the book. It always used to be very, very hard. If you go straight to the publishers, they just don't want to know. They just not really interested. But it's lovely that you are accessible.
Yeah, well, it's lovely to. I mean, writing, as you know, is a very solitary job.
Yeah.
And to actually go out and meet Joe Public, to be able to speak to somebody in the trade like yourself, is great. It's absolutely lovely to do. I went last year. I went down to a retirement community in Cornwall to give a little talk, and it was so nice just to find myself among people all over again. Yeah.
I'll have to get you over to Abruzzo, won't I?
Oh, I'd love it. I would love it, Wendy. I mean, it's Italy for me is.
Oh, well, you obviously know Chieti, because you pointed out you've got the wrong name, dear, on the book. It's not Chieti, it's Chianti. And I'm thinking, oh, Chieti, that's the town in. Yeah. So you obviously know Abruzzo.
Yeah, I don't really. I know it by name, but I've not been there. The south of Italy, and by south I mean really from Rome downwards, I know very little of, because well, you know what Italy's like. Italy is. I mean, Italy has only existed for 150 years, and Italy is still terribly, terribly parochial and regional. And I guarantee, if two Italian strangers meet in, for example, Tokyo, the first question they'll ask each other is, where do you come from? And they don't mean, are you Italian? They mean, which part of Italy do you come from?
Absolutely. I mean, there are plenty of people in my little village. They don't, if you said, how do you see yourself? They see themselves as Abruzzese.
Abruzzese,
They are Abruzzese. And then after that, they might see themselves as Italian, but you just don't really have that. I mean, we're just Brits, aren't we? And we're all in the same pot, but they don't have that cohesive structure.
No. And when it comes
so many
to
food, drink, dialect,
it's the same. You know, you go to Abruzzo and see if you can buy a bottle of Chianti. I won't have a bottle of Chianti. We drink our local wine. That's why. If that isn't good enough for you, go.
And the dialect in Bizenti would be very different to the dialect in another village. And I've listened to dialect, and I just no idea. there isn't one Italian word that you even get. It's so hard. It's like listening to Welsh. You know, there's just nothing.
My wife was brought up speaking Piemontese. And Piemontese, when I first went over to Italy, as already established, not having studied any Italian before, I actually found it easier at first to understand the local dialect because it's French-based than Italian itself. And so I picked up quite a bit of it. And when my wife, now if her sister phones up from Italy, my wife just switches from Italian to Piemontese. And it's one of those things, it's very, if you're Piemontese, you can understand Italian. But if you're Italian, you can't
understand a chance, would you?
It doesn't work both ways.
So what's next for you then, Trevor? Hopefully a book set in Abruzzo would be nice.
Well, wouldn't that be lovely? I mean, we're hopefully in the month of May, we're going to come over for a couple of weeks and start doing a bit of traveling again. See if I can find a few new places. I would like to set a book.
If you head down, Trevor, go through Abruzzo, then you get to Molise, and just around about the border, you will see some islands off to your left called the Tremiti Islands.
Oh, yeah. Never heard of them, yeah.
Tremiti. Apparently.
Oh, Tremiti, I have heard of. Yeah,
Tremiti. They are absolutely beautiful. Just the most stunning. I mean, it would be a wonderful setting. But back to islands.
That's a lovely,
again.
lovely thought. I mean, certainly the book I've just finished writing was set up near Venice. There's some hills near Venice called the Colli Ogani. It's one of those, so, it's all very flat there. And then these hills just sort of emerge from it. And then that was the one before I get lost. That was the one I'm handing in this weekend. The one that I've just finished writing was actually set on the Mediterranean coast on the west side of Italy. Yeah. And I think the next one that I'm going to start any day now will be set probably in Chianti, actually.
In Chianti,
in Tuscany again.
Yeah.
Because I've just as a palate cleanser last year, I wrote a whodunit. And I quite enjoy writing whodunits, so I'm going to have a go at them, and we'll see what happens there. In parallel with my romances.
I mean, I've started to do this and just blog about books set in Italy, review books set in Italy, and I'm just blown away with the journey that it's taking me on. The books, the people, chatting to. I mean. What's nicer? People that love Italy like I do, books, reading. I mean, it's just the perfect job. Just the perfect job.
Yeah.
Anyway, I will let you go, and thank you so much for talking to me.
Not at all. It's lovely, as I say, lovely to put a face to a name, and nice to meet a real person and talk.
And you've got a really good sense of humour there as well. I thought that as I was reading the compety, the homework that you submitted, all the notes, and I thought, this is the man with a sense of humour. This is going to be really good. So thank you so much for joining me. And I'll put it on YouTube, and I'll throw up the links on social media, Trevor.
That's lovely. Well, thank you for having me. It's been lovely talking to you.
Thank you so much. Ciao.
Bye. Ciao, ciao.
Bye.